You're watching Cold Blood Empire original story. He expected her to cry when he betrayed her. He expected her to beg, to lose control, to shame herself in front of the court. He had prepared for tears, for accusations, for the familiar ache of guilt that would follow him into the night. He believed rejection would weaken her the way it weakened most mates. He was wrong. When he announced his decision, she stood still. Her hands did not shake. She did not raise her voice. She did not ask why. She looked at him once, long enough for something unreadable to settle behind her eyes. Then she turned away as if the bond between them had never existed. Later, when the hall emptied and the torches burned low, he returned to his chambers expecting chaos. He expected broken furniture. He expected the bed to be disturbed, her scent clinging to the sheets. The bed was untouched. Her side was cold. Her belongings were gone. Even her scent had vanished, scrubbed away with intention. For the first time since taking the crown, the Alpha King felt something tighten in his chest that had nothing to do with power. It was not grief. It was not regret. It was fear, because tears would have meant she was still his. Silence meant she had already left him behind. Hey, quick question before we continue. How are you feeling right now? Thank you for being here. Truly, I'm working toward building 10,000 subscribers, and if this story already has you leaning forward, if the silence she left behind hit harder than any scream, then please take a moment to support this channel. Subscribe to Cold Blood Empire, tap the like button, and leave a comment telling me where you are watching from, because every single one of you helps keep these stories alive. Now let us return to the moment when the Alpha King made his choice and discovered that silence can be more dangerous than tears. Chapter 1. Alexandra Clifton stood 3 paces behind the Alpha King's throne when he made the announcement that ended everything between them. The great hall of Shadowmere Keep stretched wide and cold that evening, its stone walls lined with torches that cast restless shadows across the assembled court. Pack lords filled the benches on either side of the center aisle, their wives seated behind them in formal gowns heavy with embroidery. Servants pressed themselves against the back walls, silent and watchful. The air smelled of smoke, sweat, and tension. No one moved. No one whispered. Everyone waited. Brandon Lancaster stood from his throne with the kind of authority that made grown men lower their eyes. He was 29 years old, broad across the shoulders, with dark hair tied back from a face too sharp to be called kind. He wore black leather trimmed in silver, the crest of his house stitched over his heart. His voice carried without effort. I have made a decision regarding the future of this pack, he said. Alexandra felt her heartbeat slow. She knew what was coming. She had known for 3 days, ever since Megan Harding arrived at the keep with her father, Lord Garrett Harding, and a dowry large enough to fund 2 winters of warfare. She had seen the way Brandon looked at maps when Megan's name was mentioned. She had heard the council meetings through closed doors. She had watched him weigh her against territory, affection against alliance, and she had seen the scales tip. She did not blame him for choosing power. She blamed him for pretending the choice had been difficult. Brandon continued, I have accepted the alliance offered by House Harding. Effective immediately, Megan Harding will assume the position of my mate and future queen of this territory. The hall erupted. Voices overlapped in shock, in approval, in barely concealed satisfaction. Some of the lords rose from their seats. Others leaned toward their neighbors, hands moving in sharp gestures. The servants whispered behind their palms. Megan Harding sat in the front row beside her father, her face carefully blank, but her fingers were laced too tightly in her lap. She was beautiful in the way expensive things often were, polished, cold, precise. Her blonde hair was braided with gold thread. Her gown was deep green velvet. She did not smile. Alexandra stood perfectly still. She felt the weight of 100 eyes turned toward her. She felt the anticipation ripple through the room like a physical thing. They wanted her to break. They wanted her to scream, to throw herself at Brandon's feet, to beg him to reconsider. They wanted the spectacle of a woman destroyed in public. She would not give it to them. Brandon turned his head just enough to look at her. His expression was unreadable, but his jaw was tight. He expected something from her. An objection, a plea, a crack in her composure that would justify what he had just done. Alexandra met his gaze and held it. Her thoughts were sharp and clear. He wanted her to make this easier for him. He wanted her to cry so he could comfort her later in private and tell himself he was not a monster. He wanted her to rage so he could call her unreasonable. He wanted her to fight so he could prove she was not strong enough to stand beside a king. She would give him none of it. Her hands hung loose at her sides. Her breathing was even. Her posture was straight. She did not blink. She did not flinch. She simply looked at him as if he were a stranger. Brandon's eyes narrowed. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. "Alexandra," he said quietly. His voice was meant only for her, but the hall had gone so silent that everyone heard. "Do you have anything to say?" She smiled. It was a small smile, controlled and deliberate. It did not reach her eyes. It was the kind of smile a person wore when they had already made a decision and no longer cared about the outcome. "No," she said. Her voice was calm. "I have nothing to say." The silence that followed was worse than any scream. Brandon stared at her. His hand twitched at his side as if he wanted to reach for her, but he stopped himself. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked like a man who had just realized he had miscalculated something important. Alexandra turned away. She did not bow. She did not wait for dismissal. She simply walked toward the doors at the back of the hall, her footsteps steady on the stone floor. The crowd parted for her without being asked. No one spoke. No one stopped her. She pushed the heavy doors open and stepped into the corridor beyond. Behind her, the hall remained frozen. Brandon watched her go. His chest felt tight. His pulse was too fast. He told himself it was a relief. He told himself it was easier this way. He told himself she would come to him later, once the shock wore off, and they would talk like reasonable people. But something in the way she had smiled made him feel like he had just lost something he would never get back. Megan Harding rose from her seat and walked toward the throne. Her father followed. The court began to murmur again, filling the silence with congratulations and political maneuvering. Brandon forced himself to turn away from the doors and focus on the woman who now stood beside him. Megan's hand was cold when she placed it on his arm. "She took that well," Megan said softly. There was no triumph in her voice, but there was satisfaction. Brandon said nothing. He did not know yet that Alexandra had already left the keep. He did not know that she had prepared for this moment long before he made his announcement. He did not know that the woman he had just betrayed had no intention of waiting around to see what he would do next. All he knew was that the hall felt colder than it had before. Chapter 2. Brandon returned to his chambers 3 hours after the announcement. The hours filled with council meetings reviewing trade agreements with Lord Harding. The corridors of Shadowmere Keep were quiet at this hour, the torches burning low in their sconces. Most of the court had retired for the night, their bellies full of wine and their minds full of gossip. Brandon had spent the last hour in the council room with Lord Harding, reviewing maps and trade agreements and military commitments. Megan had excused herself early, claiming exhaustion from travel. Her father had clapped Brandon on the shoulder and called him a smart man. Brandon did not feel smart. He felt restless. His thoughts kept circling back to the way Alexandra had looked at him in the hall. He kept replaying her smile, the way it had not reached her eyes. He kept hearing her voice, calm and final, when she said she had nothing to say. He told himself it was natural for her to be upset. He told himself she needed time to adjust. He told himself she would come to him when she was ready, and they would talk, and he would explain that this decision was not about her. It was about the pack. It was about survival. She would understand. She always understood. He pushed open the door to his chambers. The room was dark except for the faint glow of embers in the fireplace. The air was still. Brandon stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He crossed to the table near the window and poured himself a cup of water from the pitcher. His hands were steady. He drank slowly, staring out at the courtyard below. He expected Alexandra to be in bed. He expected her to be awake, her back turned to him, waiting for him to speak first. He had rehearsed what he would say. He would sit on the edge of the bed and tell her that nothing between them had to change. He would remind her that she was still important to him. He would touch her shoulder and wait for her to turn toward him. He set the cup down and turned toward the bed. It was empty. Brandon frowned. He crossed the room and looked at the sheets. They were smooth, undisturbed, as if no one had touched them. The pillow on Alexandra's side was perfectly fluffed. The blanket was folded at the foot of the bed exactly as the servants left it every morning. His chest tightened. He turned toward the wardrobe and pulled the doors open. Her dresses were gone. The shelves where she kept her combs and ribbons were bare. The small wooden box where she stored her mother's jewelry was missing. Brandon's pulse quickened. He crossed to the washing table. The basin was dry. The soap she always used, the one that smelled faintly of lavender, was gone. The towel she kept folded beside the mirror was not there. He spun toward the chest at the foot of the bed and threw it open. Empty. His breathing was too fast now. He moved through the room, checking every corner, every surface. The book she had been reading was gone from the nightstand. The shawl she draped over the chair was missing. Even the small clay cup she used for tea in the mornings had vanished. There was no sign she had ever been there. Brandon stood in the center of the room, his hands clenched into fists. His thoughts were sharp and chaotic. She had planned this. She had packed her belongings before the announcement. She had known what he was going to do, and she had prepared to leave. But how? He crossed to the door and yanked it open. The guard stationed in the corridor straightened immediately. "Where is Alexandra Clifton?" Brandon demanded. The guard blinked. "I do not know, Your Majesty. I have not seen her since the assembly. Did she leave the keep?" "I do not know, Your Majesty. I was stationed here all evening." Brandon turned and strode down the corridor. His boots echoed against the stone. He descended the stairs 2 at a time and crossed the main hall toward the servants' quarters. He found the head housekeeper, an older woman named Isla Reeves, folding linens in the storage room. "Where is Alexandra?" Brandon asked. Isla looked up, startled. "I do not know, Your Majesty. I have not seen her since this afternoon." "Did she take anything with her?" Isla hesitated. "I do not know what you mean, Your Majesty." Brandon stepped closer. "Her belongings are gone. Did you help her pack?" Isla's face remained neutral, but her hand stilled on the linen. "No, Your Majesty. I did not help her pack." Brandon stared at her. He knew she was lying. He could see it in the way she refused to meet his eyes, the way her fingers gripped the fabric too tightly. But he also knew she would not tell him anything, no matter how much he pressed. He turned and left the room. He spent the next hour searching the keep. He questioned guards, servants, and stable hands. No one had seen Alexandra leave. No one had helped her. No one knew where she had gone. By the time Brandon returned to his chambers, the fire had died completely. The room was cold. He stood in the doorway and stared at the bed. It looked wrong. He had shared that bed with Alexandra for 2 years. He knew the way she slept, curled on her side with one hand tucked under the pillow. He knew the sound of her breathing in the dark. He knew the warmth of her body beside his. Now the bed was empty, and the room felt like a tomb. Brandon crossed to the bed and sat on the edge. He pressed his hand against the mattress where she used to sleep. The fabric was cold. There was no lingering warmth, no trace of her scent. She had erased herself completely. For the first time, Brandon felt something close to panic. He had expected tears. He had expected anger. He had expected her to fight for what they had. He had not expected her to vanish. He told himself she would come back. She had nowhere else to go. She had no family, no allies, no resources. She would realize she needed him, and she would return. But even as he thought it, he knew it was a lie. Alexandra Clifton had not cried. She had not begged. She had not broken. She had simply left, and Brandon had no idea how to get her back. If Alexandra's disappearance unsettled you, take a moment to support this story. Subscribe to Cold Blood Empire, tap the like button, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Now let us continue. Chapter 3. The search began at dawn. Brandon sent 20 men into the surrounding territory, with orders to find Alexandra and bring her back unharmed. He sent riders to the nearest villages, to the mountain passes, to the trade roads that led east and west. He offered a reward to anyone who could provide information about her whereabouts. No one found anything. The men returned empty-handed after 3 days. There were no tracks leading away from the keep. No one in the villages had seen a woman traveling alone. The merchants on the trade roads had not noticed anyone matching her description. It was as if Alexandra had stepped out of the great hall and disappeared into nothing. Brandon stood in the war room, staring at the maps spread across the table. His advisors surrounded him, their faces carefully neutral. Lord Harding stood to his left, his arms crossed over his chest. "She cannot have gone far," Lord Harding said. "A woman alone, with no coin and no protection, will surface eventually. Give it time." Brandon's jaw tightened. "She had time to plan this. She knew what I was going to do before I announced it." "Then she had help," Lord Harding said. "Someone in the keep assisting her. Find out who, and you will find her." Brandon had already questioned half the staff. No one admitted to anything. No one had seen anything. The silence was absolute. Rhys Burton, Brandon's second in command, leaned against the wall near the door. He was a tall man with pale eyes and a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. He had served Brandon for 10 years, and he knew when to speak and when to stay quiet. "She does not want to be found," Rhys said. Brandon turned toward him. "What are you saying?" "I am saying she left because she wanted to leave. She is not hiding in the woods waiting for someone to bring her back. She is gone." Brandon's hands curled into fists. "She will come back." Rhys raised an eyebrow. "Why would she?" "Because she has nowhere else to go." "She had nowhere to go when she left," Rhys said. "And yet she left anyway." The room fell silent. Brandon stared at the map. His thoughts were sharp and defensive. Alexandra had no resources. She had no connections outside the pack. She had spent the last 2 years at his side, learning the politics of court, attending councils, managing the household. She had no skills that would help her survive on her own. She would realize her mistake. She would come back. She had to. Lord Harding cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, we have more pressing matters to attend to. The alliance with House Harding requires formal ceremonies, announcements to the other territories, and preparations for the mating bond. We cannot afford to delay." Brandon looked at him. "I will handle it." "When?" "Soon. Your Majesty, with respect, the longer you wait, the weaker you appear. The other packs are watching. They need to see strength, not hesitation." Brandon's eyes narrowed. "I said I will handle it." Lord Harding inclined his head and said nothing more. The advisors filed out of the room one by one. Rhys lingered near the door. "You are making a mistake," Rhys said quietly. "She will come back," Brandon said. "And if she does not?" Brandon did not answer. Rhys left. Brandon stood alone in the war room, staring at the maps. He told himself that Alexandra was hurt, that she needed time to process what had happened, that she would realize he had made the right decision for the pack. He told himself that she still loved him, that the bond between them was stronger than politics. He told himself a lot of things. None of them were true. 3 weeks passed. Brandon went through the motions of ruling. He attended councils. He reviewed petitions. He met with Lord Harding and discussed trade routes and military strategy. He stood beside Meghan at formal dinners and let the court see them together. Meghan was everything a queen should be. She was intelligent, composed, and skilled at navigating court politics. She smiled at the right moments and spoke with measured authority. She never asked about Alexandra. She never mentioned the empty chambers or the search parties that had returned with nothing. She was perfect. Brandon hated it. He could not sleep in his chambers. Every time he tried, he saw the empty bed and felt the absence like a weight on his chest. He started sleeping in the study, sprawled in a chair with maps and reports scattered around him. He told himself it was because he had too much work. He told himself it was temporary. It was not temporary. He stopped asking about Alexandra after the first month. The search parties had found nothing. The merchants had seen nothing. The neighboring packs had heard nothing. She had vanished completely, and no one seemed to care except him. The court moved on. Meghan moved into the chambers that had once belonged to Alexandra. She redecorated. She replaced the curtains, the rugs, and the furniture. She erased every trace of the woman who had lived there before. Brandon let her. He told himself it did not matter. He told himself Alexandra was gone, and he had made his choice, and he needed to focus on the future. He told himself that power was worth more than love. He almost believed it. 6 months after Alexandra disappeared, Brandon stood on the balcony outside the Great Hall and stared at the mountains in the distance. The sun was setting, casting the peaks in shades of gold and red. The air was cool. The courtyard below was quiet. Megan joined him a moment later. She stood beside him without speaking, her hands folded in front of her. "You are thinking about her," Megan said. Brandon did not deny it. "She is not coming back," Megan said. Her voice was calm, factual. "You need to accept that." "I know," Brandon said. "Do you?" He turned to look at her. Megan's face was unreadable. She was beautiful, intelligent, and utterly distant. She had never asked him to love her. She had never pretended their arrangement was anything other than political. "I made the right choice," Brandon said. "Yes," Megan said. "You did." She turned and walked back inside. Brandon stayed on the balcony until the sun disappeared behind the mountains. He thought about Alexandra's smile, the one she had given him in the Great Hall. He thought about the empty bed. He thought about the silence. He told himself he had won. But winning had never felt so much like losing. Chapter 4. 2 years passed. Brandon's rule expanded in ways he had not thought possible. The alliance with House Harding brought wealth, soldiers, and trade agreements that stretched across 3 territories. The pack grew stronger. The keep was renovated. The armory was stocked. The treasury overflowed. Brandon sat in council meetings and listened to reports of prosperity. He signed treaties. He negotiated alliances. He made decisions that secured the future of his people. He was a good king. He was also miserable. The court did not see it. They saw a man who commanded respect, who made hard choices, who never wavered. They saw a king who had sacrificed personal happiness for the good of the pack. They admired him for it. Megan saw it. She never said anything. She played her role perfectly. She attended state functions. She managed the household. She smiled at visiting dignitaries and spoke with the kind of authority that made people listen. She was everything a queen should be, but she slept in separate chambers. Brandon had not touched her since the mating bond ceremony, a cold and formal affair that had satisfied the court, but left both of them hollow. Megan had not objected. She had made it clear from the beginning that she expected partnership, not passion. She wanted power, not love. Brandon respected her for it. He also resented her for it, because every time he saw her, he thought about the woman she had replaced. Brandon no longer slept in his chambers. He tried once, 6 months after the mating ceremony, and lasted less than an hour. The room felt wrong. The bed felt wrong. Megan's belongings were everywhere, and none of them belonged to Alexandra. He moved to the study permanently. He told the staff it was temporary. He told Megan it was because he had too much work. He told himself it was practical. It was none of those things. He slept poorly. He dreamed of empty beds and silent women. He woke in the middle of the night and stared at the ceiling, his chest tight with something he refused to name. Rhys noticed. "You look terrible," Rhys said one morning. They were standing in the training yard, watching the younger wolves spar. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the dirt. "I am fine," Brandon said. "You are not sleeping." "I am sleeping enough." Rhys gave him a long look. "You cannot keep doing this." "Doing what?" "Punishing yourself." Brandon's jaw tightened. "I am not punishing myself." "Then what are you doing?" Brandon did not answer. Rhys sighed. "She is gone, Brandon. She has been gone for 2 years. You need to let her go." "I have let her go." "Have you?" Brandon turned and walked away. Rhys did not follow. Rumors began to surface in the 3rd year. Merchants traveling through the southern territories spoke of a woman who had appeared in the city of Ashford, a bustling trade hub 300 miles from Shadowmere Keep. She was described as beautiful, intelligent, and impossibly skilled in medicine. She had established a healing house that treated everyone, regardless of their ability to pay. She had saved lives that other healers had given up on. The descriptions were vague. No one mentioned her name. No one knew where she had come from. Brandon heard the rumors and dismissed them. There were hundreds of healers in the southern territories. The woman in Ashford could be anyone, but the rumors persisted. A traveling lord mentioned her during a state dinner. He spoke of a healer who had cured his daughter of a fever that had killed 3 other children in his household. He praised her skill, her calm demeanor, her refusal to accept payment beyond what was necessary. "She is remarkable," the Lord said. "I have never met anyone like her." Megan raised an eyebrow. "Did she give you her name?" "She did not," the Lord said. "She avoids attention. Some say she is running from something." Brandon's hand tightened around his cup. Later that night, he stood in his study and stared at the maps on the wall. Ashford was marked in red ink, a dot on the southern border. He told himself it was not her. He told himself Alexandra had no training in medicine. He told himself she would not have survived 2 years on her own. But the doubt lingered. 3 years after Alexandra disappeared, a crisis emerged. A sickness swept through the northern villages, killing children and the elderly within days of infection. The pack healers tried everything. They used herbs, bloodletting, and prayers. Nothing worked. The death toll climbed. Brandon called an emergency council. "We need help," Reese said. "Our healers do not know how to stop this." "Then we bring in healers from other territories," Brandon said. "We have," Reese said. "None of them know how to treat it either." Lord Harding leaned forward. "There is a healer in Ashford. I have heard she is the best in the Southern Territories. If anyone can stop this, it is her." Brandon's chest tightened. "Ashford is 300 miles away. Then we send riders immediately," Lord Harding said. "We offer her whatever she wants. Money, land, protection. We cannot afford to wait." Brandon stared at the table. His thoughts were sharp and chaotic. If the healer in Ashford was Alexandra, he would have to face her. He would have to beg for her help. He would have to admit that he needed her. If the healer was not Alexandra, he was wasting time. "Send the riders," Brandon said. Reese nodded and left the room. Brandon sat alone at the table, staring at the maps. He told himself it did not matter who the healer was. He told himself this was about saving lives, not settling old debts, but his hands were shaking. Chapter 5. The riders returned a week later. They brought news that the healer had agreed to come, but only under specific conditions. She would assess the situation herself. She would accept no interference. She would leave immediately if her authority was questioned. Brandon agreed to all of it. He stood in the courtyard when she arrived, flanked by Reese and 2 guards. The sun was high, the air warm. The courtyard was quiet except for the sound of horses entering through the gates. Brandon's pulse was too fast. The first horse carried a guard, the second carried supplies, the third carried a woman. She dismounted with practiced ease, her movements smooth and controlled. She wore a simple traveling cloak, dark blue and dusty from the road. Her hair was pulled back in a braid. Her face was turned away as she spoke to one of the riders. Brandon's chest tightened. He knew her before she turned around. Alexandra Clifton looked at him for the first time in 3 years, and her expression did not change. She was not surprised. She was not angry. She was not pleased. She looked at him the way she might look at a stranger. Brandon felt the ground shift beneath him. She had changed. Her face was thinner, sharper. Her posture was straighter. She moved with the kind of confidence that came from self-reliance, not dependence. She wore no jewelry. Her hands were bare. She looked nothing like the woman he had betrayed. She looked stronger. "Your Majesty," Alexandra said. Her voice was calm, professional. She inclined her head in a gesture that was polite, but not deferential. Brandon could not speak. Reese stepped forward. "Thank you for coming. The children in the northern villages are dying. We need your help." Alexandra's gaze shifted to Reese. "Show me the patients." "Of course," Reese said. He gestured toward the keep. "We have prepared chambers for you." "I will not need chambers," Alexandra said. "I will stay in the villages." "The villages are not safe," Reese said. "The sickness is spreading." "Then I need to be there," Alexandra said. Her tone was firm. "Take me to the patients." Reese glanced at Brandon. Brandon nodded. "This way," Reese said. Alexandra followed him without looking back at Brandon. Brandon stood in the courtyard long after she was gone. His hands were clenched into fists. His chest felt tight. His thoughts were chaotic and sharp. She had not acknowledged him. She had not asked about the past. She had not even looked at him long enough to show emotion. She had treated him like he did not matter. And for the first time in 3 years, Brandon realized that he had lost her completely. Alexandra spent 2 days in the northern villages. She moved from house to house, examining the sick, asking questions, taking notes. She worked without stopping, her hands steady, her mind focused. The villagers watched her with a mixture of hope and fear. The pack healers watched her with suspicion. She ignored both. On the 3rd day, she returned to the keep and requested a meeting with the council. Brandon sat at the head of the table, flanked by Rhys, Lord Harding, and Megan. Alexandra stood at the opposite end, her hands folded in front of her. "The sickness is caused by contaminated water," Alexandra said. "There is a dead animal in the well near the main village. The infection is spreading through the water supply." The council stared at her. "How do you know?" Lord Harding asked. "I examined the well," Alexandra said. "I also tested samples from the other wells in the area. Only one is contaminated. Then we close the well and dig a new one," Brandon said. "Yes," Alexandra said. "But you will also need to treat the patients who are already sick. I have prepared a list of herbs and procedures. Your healers can follow it." She placed a folded piece of parchment on the table. Rhys picked it up and unfolded it. His eyes scanned the contents. "This is detailed. It needs to be," Alexandra said. "The infection is aggressive. If the treatment is not followed exactly, the patients will die." "How long will it take?" Brandon asked. Alexandra looked at him. Her gaze was steady, unreadable. "If the well is closed today and the treatment begins immediately, the death toll will stop within a week. And if we delay, more children will die." The room fell silent. Brandon stared at her. He wanted to ask her 1,000 questions. He wanted to know where she had been, how she had learned medicine, why she had agreed to come. He wanted to know if she hated him, but he could not ask any of it. "Close the well," Brandon said. "Begin the treatment." Rhys nodded and stood. The other advisors followed. Alexandra turned to leave. "Wait," Brandon said. She stopped but did not turn around. "Stay," Brandon said, "at least until the sickness is contained." "I will stay as long as necessary," Alexandra said. Her voice was neutral. "But I will not stay longer than that." She walked out of the room without waiting for a response. Brandon sat alone at the table, staring at the empty doorway. Megan entered a moment later. She crossed to the table and sat in the chair beside him. "She is not the same woman you remember," Megan said. "I know," Brandon said. "She does not need you anymore." "I know." Megan studied him. "Are you going to try to get her back?" Brandon did not answer. Megan stood and left. Brandon sat in the council room long after the sun set. He thought about the way Alexandra had looked at him, as if he were nothing. He thought about the empty bed, the silent chambers, the 3 years of absence. He had expected her to come back broken. She had come back untouchable, and he had no idea what to do about it. Pause with me for a moment. If this reunion surprised you, if the power shift felt sharp and earned, then please support this channel by subscribing to Cold Blood Empire and liking this story. Let me know in the comments, do you think Brandon deserves a second chance? Or has Alexandra already moved too far beyond him? Your voice matters here. Now let us return to the choice that will cost him everything. Chapter 6. The well was closed. The treatment began. Within 3 days, the children stopped dying. Alexandra worked without rest, moving between the villages and the keep, checking on patients, adjusting dosages, answering questions. The pack healers followed her instructions with grudging respect. The villagers called her a miracle. Brandon watched from a distance. He saw the way she moved through the keep, calm and focused. He saw the way she spoke to the healers, her tone firm but not cruel. He saw the way she ignored him completely. On the 5th day, he found her in the library. The room was quiet, filled with the scent of old paper and dust. Shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, packed with books and scrolls. Alexandra sat at a table near the window, a stack of medical texts open in front of her. She was writing notes, her hand moving quickly across the parchment. Brandon stood in the doorway and watched her. She did not look up. "May I speak with you?" Brandon asked. "You are the king," Alexandra said without lifting her gaze. You do not need permission to speak. I am asking anyway. Alexandra set down her pen and looked at him. Her expression was neutral. What do you want? Brandon stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. He crossed to the table but did not sit. I want to know where you went, he said. South, Alexandra said. That is not an answer. It is the only answer you will get. Brandon's jaw tightened. Why did you leave? Alexandra leaned back in her chair and studied him. Her gaze was steady, assessing. Why do you think I left? Because I hurt you. Yes, Alexandra said. You did. I made the right choice for the pack. Yes, Alexandra said. You did. Brandon frowned. Then why are you angry? I am not angry, Alexandra said. Her tone was calm, factual. I was angry 3 years ago. I am not angry anymore. Then what are you? Indifferent. The word hit Brandon like a physical blow. He stared at her, searching for some sign of emotion, some crack in her composure. There was nothing. You do not mean that, he said. I do, Alexandra said. You made your choice, I made mine. We both moved on. I did not move on, Brandon said. The words came out before he could stop them. I looked for you. I sent riders. I offered rewards. I did everything I could to find you. And yet you stopped looking after 6 months, Alexandra said. You married Megan. You built your kingdom. You did exactly what you set out to do. That does not mean I forgot about you. Alexandra's expression did not change. Brandon, I do not care if you forgot about me or not. It does not matter anymore. It matters to me. That is your problem, not mine. Brandon's hands curled into fists. Why are you being like this? Like what? Cold, distant, as if we meant nothing to each other. Alexandra stood. She closed the book in front of her and stacked it neatly with the others. She looked at Brandon with the same calm, unreadable expression she had worn since she arrived. We did mean something to each other, she said. But that was a long time ago. You ended it when you chose power over me. I am not angry about it. I understand why you did it. But I also do not owe you anything. I am not asking you to owe me anything, Brandon said. I am asking you to talk to me. I am talking to you. I am asking you to forgive me. Alexandra tilted her head slightly, as if considering the request. Then she shook her head. No, she said. Brandon stared at her. Why not? Because forgiveness is something you earn, Alexandra said, and you have not earned it. What do I need to do? Nothing, Alexandra said. There is nothing you can do. That is not fair. Fair? Alexandra's voice sharpened for the first time. You stood in front of the entire court and replaced me with another woman. You did it publicly, deliberately, and without warning. You expected me to cry. You expected me to beg. You expected me to make it easier for you by breaking in front of everyone. And when I did not, you told yourself I would come back, because I had nowhere else to go. Brandon's chest tightened. I did not come back, Alexandra continued. I built a life without you. I learned skills you never knew I had. I helped people you will never meet. I survived, and I did it alone. So no, Brandon, I am not going to forgive you just because you regret your choice. She picked up the stack of books and walked toward the door. Brandon stepped in front of her. Alexandra, please. She stopped. Her gaze was cold. Move, she said. I still care about you. That is not my concern. It should be. Why? Alexandra asked. Because you are the king? Because you think your feelings are more important than mine? Because you believe I should be grateful you are paying attention to me again? Brandon flinched. Move, Alexandra said again. This time he did. She walked past him without another word and left the library. Brandon stood alone in the silence, staring at the empty doorway. His chest felt tight. His thoughts were sharp and defensive and ashamed all at once. She was right. He had expected her to break. He had expected her to need him. He had expected her to come back. And when she had not, he had convinced himself that she would eventually. But Alexandra Clifton did not need him anymore, and that terrified him more than anything. Chapter 7. The sickness was contained by the end of the 2nd week. The children recovered. The well was replaced. The villagers returned to their routines. Alexandra prepared to leave. Brandon found her in the courtyard, loading supplies onto her horse. "You do not have to leave immediately," he said. Alexandra tightened the straps on her saddlebag without looking at him. "My work here is finished. Stay one more night. Rest before you travel." "I do not need rest. Alexandra, please." She turned to look at him. Her expression was guarded. "Why do you want me to stay?" Brandon hesitated. "Because I want to talk to you. We already talked." "Not the way I want to." "Then the problem is yours, not mine." Brandon stepped closer. "I made a mistake." Alexandra raised an eyebrow. "Which one?" "All of them," Brandon said. "I made the wrong choice. I hurt you. I lost you. And I have regretted it every day since." "Regret is not the same as change," Alexandra said. "I know," Brandon said. "But I want to change. I want to make this right." "You cannot make it right," Alexandra said. "What is done is done." "Then let me try to make it better." Alexandra studied him. Her gaze was sharp, assessing. "What do you want from me, Brandon?" "I want you to give me a chance." "A chance to do what?" "To prove that I still care about you. That I never stopped caring about you." Alexandra crossed her arms. "You are married." "The marriage is political," Brandon said. "Megan and I do not share chambers. We do not share anything beyond duty. That is not my concern. It should be." "Why?" Alexandra asked. "Because you think I should feel sorry for you? Because you think I should take you back just because your marriage is cold?" Brandon's jaw tightened. "I am not asking you to take me back. I am asking you to stay long enough for me to prove that I am not the man who betrayed you." Alexandra was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed. "One night," she said. "I will stay one night, but if you waste my time, I will leave, and I will not come back." "I will not waste your time," Brandon said. They met in the gardens after dark. The gardens stretched behind the keep, a sprawling maze of hedges, flower beds, and stone paths. Lanterns hung from the trees, casting soft light across the greenery. The air smelled of roses and earth. Alexandra stood near the fountain, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Brandon approached slowly, his hands loose at his sides. "Thank you for staying," he said. "I have not decided if I regret it yet," Alexandra said. Brandon smiled faintly. "Fair enough." They stood in silence for a moment. The sound of water trickling from the fountain filled the space between them. "I am sorry," Brandon said. "For everything." Alexandra looked at him. "You already said that." "I know, but I need to say it again. I need you to know that I understand what I did. I chose power over you. I convinced myself it was the right choice, but it was not. It was selfish. It was cruel. And it destroyed the best thing I ever had." Alexandra's expression softened slightly. "Brandon, I am not the woman you remember. I am not the woman who stood beside you in the Great Hall. I am not the woman who waited for you in your chambers. That woman is gone." "I know," Brandon said. "But I want to know the woman you are now." Alexandra tilted her head. "Why?" "Because I never stopped loving you." The words hung in the air between them. Alexandra's gaze did not waver. "Love is not enough." "I know," Brandon said, "but it is a start." She was silent for a long time. Then she uncrossed her arms and took a step closer. "If I give you a chance," she said, "it will not be the same as before. I will not wait for you. I will not forgive you easily. I will not make this simple." "I do not want simple," Brandon said. "I want you." Alexandra studied him. Then she reached out and placed her hand on his chest, directly over his heart. Her touch was light, but it felt like fire. "Prove it," she said. Brandon covered her hand with his. His pulse was too fast. His chest felt tight. He wanted to pull her closer, to kiss her, to hold her the way he used to, but he did not. He simply stood there, his hand over hers, and let her decide. Alexandra stepped back after a moment. Her expression was still guarded, but something in her eyes had shifted. "One chance," she said. "Do not waste it." She turned and walked back toward the keep. Brandon stood in the garden long after she was gone. His hand was still warm from where she had touched him. For the first time in 3 years, he felt something close to hope. Chapter 8. The following morning, Lord Harding arrived unannounced. He swept into the council room with Megan at his side, his face tight with anger. Brandon was reviewing reports when they entered. Rhys stood near the window, arms crossed. "We need to talk," Lord Harding said. Brandon set down the parchment. "About what?" "About her," Lord Harding said. He gestured toward the doorway. "The healer, Alexandra Clifton." Brandon's jaw tightened. "What about her?" "She is still here," Lord Harding said. "The sickness is contained. Her work is finished. Why has she not left?" "That is none of your concern," Brandon said. "It is my concern when it affects the Alliance," Lord Harding said. "Megan is your mate. The court recognizes her as queen. If you allow Alexandra to remain here, you undermine everything we have built." "Alexandra is a guest," Brandon said. "She saved lives. She is entitled to stay as long as she wishes." "She is more than a guest," Megan said quietly. She stood beside her father, her hands folded in front of her. "She is your past. And if you are not careful, she will become your future." Brandon looked at her. "Megan, this is not what you think." "Then what is it?" Megan asked. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you are trying to replace me." "I am not trying to replace you." "Then send her away." Brandon was silent. Lord Harding stepped forward. "Your Majesty, I will be direct. If you do not send Alexandra away, I will withdraw my support. The alliance will end. The trade agreements will dissolve. The soldiers I provided will return to my territory." "You are threatening me?" Brandon asked. "I am protecting my interests," Lord Harding said. "And my daughter's position." Brandon stood. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "If you withdraw your support, you will lose access to the northern trade routes. You will lose the protection of my army. You will lose everything you gained from this alliance. And you will lose everything you gained from me," Lord Harding said. The room fell silent. Rhys pushed off the wall. "This is a mistake. Stay out of this," Lord Harding said. "No," Rhys said. "You are forcing him to choose between power and the woman he loves. You are putting him in the same position he was in 3 years ago. And if he makes the same choice, he will regret it for the rest of his life." Lord Harding's eyes narrowed. "He is a king. Kings do not have the luxury of love." "Then maybe he should not be king," Rhys said. The room went silent. Brandon looked at Rhys, then at Lord Harding, then at Megan. His thoughts were sharp and clear. He had made this choice before. He had chosen power over love, and it had cost him everything that mattered. He would not make the same mistake twice. "Lord Harding," Brandon said, "I respect the alliance we built. I respect the resources you provided. But I will not send Alexandra away to protect your pride." Lord Harding's face darkened. "Then the alliance is over." "So be it," Brandon said. Megan stared at him. "Brandon, do not do this." "I am sorry, Megan," Brandon said. "But I cannot keep pretending this marriage is real. You deserve better than a man who does not love you." Megan's expression did not change, but her hands tightened in front of her. "You are a fool." "I know," Brandon said. Lord Harding turned and strode toward the door. "We leave today, and you will regret this decision." Megan followed him without another word. The door slammed shut behind them. Rhys let out a long breath. "You just destroyed everything you built." "I know," Brandon said. "And you do not regret it?" Brandon thought about the empty bed. He thought about the silent chambers. He thought about the 3 years he had spent pretending he did not care. "No," he said. "I do not regret it. Alexandra was in the library when Brandon found her." She looked up when he entered, her expression wary. "What happened?" "Lord Harding withdrew his support," Brandon said. "The alliance is over." Alexandra set down her pen. "Because of me?" "Because of me," Brandon said. "I chose you over power, and I would do it again." Alexandra stared at him. "Brandon, you just destroyed your kingdom." "No," Brandon said. "I destroyed a kingdom built on lies. I can rebuild something better." Alexandra stood. She crossed to him slowly, her gaze searching his face. "You do not have to do this." "Yes, I do," Brandon said, "because I cannot live the rest of my life knowing I chose wrong twice." Alexandra was silent for a long moment. Then she reached up and placed her hand on his cheek. You are an idiot, she said softly. I know, Brandon said. She smiled. It was small, tentative, but it was real. Come here, she said. Brandon pulled her into his arms. She fit against him the way she always had, her head tucked beneath his chin, her hands pressed against his chest. He held her tightly, breathing in the scent of lavender and something uniquely hers. I missed you, he whispered. I know, she said. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet library, surrounded by books and dust and the weight of 3 years apart. And for the first time in 3 years, Brandon felt like he could breathe. Chapter 9. 6 months later, the kingdom was different. The alliance with House Harding was gone, but new alliances had formed. Smaller houses, ones that valued loyalty over wealth, had pledged their support. The territory was smaller, but it was stronger. The court was quieter, but it was honest. Brandon stood on the balcony outside the great hall, watching the sun set over the mountains. The air was cool. The courtyard below was quiet. Alexandra joined him a moment later. She wore a simple dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She stood beside him and leaned against the railing. The council meeting went well, she said. It did, Brandon said. Lord Burton thinks we can secure a trade agreement with the Eastern Territories by spring. That would help, Alexandra said. Brandon looked at her. She was different now than she had been 3 years ago. She was stronger, more independent, more confident. She did not need him the way she once had, and he loved her more for it. Are you happy? He asked. Alexandra turned to look at him. Yes, are you? Yes, Brandon said. She smiled. Good. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun disappear behind the mountains. Do you ever think about how different things would be if I had made a different choice? Brandon asked. Sometimes, Alexandra said, but I do not regret what happened. Brandon frowned. You do not regret being betrayed? No, Alexandra said, because if you had not betrayed me, I would never have left. And if I had never left, I would never have learned who I could be without you. Brandon was silent. I loved you, Alexandra said, but I needed to love myself first. And I could not do that while I was standing in your shadow. I understand, Brandon said. Alexandra reached for his hand. Her fingers laced through his. I love you now, but it is different. I am different. And if you ever betray me again, I will leave, and I will not come back. I know, Brandon said. And I will never betray you again. She squeezed his hand. Good. They stood together on the balcony, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. The kingdom was smaller. The court was quieter. The future was uncertain. But for the first time in 3 years, Brandon felt like he was where he was supposed to be. That night, Brandon returned to his chambers. The room was different now. Alexandra had moved back in, but she had kept her independence. Her belongings were scattered throughout the space, but they did not dominate it. The room felt balanced, shared, equal. Brandon stood in the doorway and looked at the bed. It was no longer empty. Alexandra was already there, sitting against the pillows with a book in her lap. She looked up when he entered and smiled. Are you going to stand there all night? She asked. Brandon crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. He reached for her hand and held it gently. I am glad you came back, he said. I am glad you gave me a reason to, Alexandra said. Brandon leaned forward and kissed her. It was slow, careful, full of the kind of tenderness that came from loss and healing and hard-won trust. Alexandra kissed him back, her hand threading through his hair. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. Do not make me regret this, she whispered. I will not, Brandon said, and for the first time in 3 years, he believed it. They lay down together, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. The room was quiet. The fire burned low in the hearth. The bed was warm. Brandon closed his eyes and thought about the empty bed, the silent chambers, the 3 years of absence. He thought about the woman who had refused to cry, who had disappeared without a trace, who had rebuilt herself into something untouchable. He thought about the choice he had made, and the choice he had unmade, and he thought about the lesson he had learned. Love without ownership, power without dominance, Trust earned, not demanded. The empty bed had taught him all of it, and he would never forget. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. Brandon's journey was never just about love. It was about choice, consequence, and learning that power without humility leads to silence, not loyalty. If this story meant something to you, please subscribe to Cold Blood Empire, like the video, and leave a comment sharing what moment stayed with you the most. I am building a community that values strong storytelling, emotional depth, and earned redemption, and I would be honored to have you here. Until the next story, remember this: love without ownership, power without dominance, trust must be earned.